welcome to church on this Advent Sunday. If you are confused about the way Western societies have developed over the past few decades, then you are not alone. My son and I have been listening recently to a lecture on this topic given by Bishop Robert Barron, an American Roman Catholic bishop and student of philosophy. The bishop takes who he believes are the most four influential philosophers of the past 150 years, most responsible for the present situation in our Western societies. Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Michel Foucault. These four have been extraordinarily influential on Western thinking. To understand where we are, we have to look at things philosophically, because philosophy, far from being an esoteric academic discipline, has far-reaching social consequences and effects. This is why Bishop Barron actually calls his lecture Ideas Have Consequences. Well, Bishop Barron begins with Karl Marx, the best known and possibly the most influential. Far from being now forgotten, Marx is undergoing something of a revival among some of the young. Marx was born in 1818 and died in 1883. He was descended from a long line of rabbis, and though atheistic, was profoundly influenced by that inherited religious view of things. Marx's philosophy had a huge impact on the lives of hundreds of millions of people in the 20th century. Marx was profoundly influenced by the atheist philosopher Friedrich Feuerbach, who said, "There is no salvation outside humanity." He said that we project outside of ourselves the bigger picture, the idealized state, and then try to conform ourselves to its ideals. Marx said that we are so unhappy and alienated in our lives that we invent this ideal world, the opium of the people, to dull our suffering. For Marx, the bishop explains, religion is part of the superstructure of society. The substructure is always economic, the core of any society. But this throws up the superstructure in order to protect the substructure. That is its purpose. So the purpose of politics, for instance, is to protect the substructure. So even the military, entertainment, and the arts, often backed by the rich, are part of the superstructure. The Marxist sets out to break through the superstructure and expose it. In this way, we can get to the substructure beneath and change it. This happens by stirring up an antagonism between the oppressed and the oppressors. There are overtones of this in the world today. Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche was as influential as Marx. Also the son of a pastor, born in 1844, he died in 1900. He also abandoned religious faith, like Marx. He became a student of language in the same way as Sartre and Foucault. Not of languages, but of language itself. He was a creative thinker who liked short phrases. He is best known for his saying, "God is dead, and we killed him." The implication he draws from this remark is that the foundation of meaning and truth and value in our societies is now giving way to something else. For most of Western thought, though, from classical times onwards, God or the divine has been the foundation for objective values, because God was thought to be the supreme logos, or the supreme wisdom. If there is no God, there is no foundation for the claim to objective truth. Nietzsche says, there is now only perspectivism. My truth or your truth, but not the truth. This has led, of course, to the relativizing of truth in our own times. You can see how we are beginning to understand where Western society finds itself today by listening to those philosophers. If God is dead, there are no claims for ultimate values or the truth. Nietzsche reckons we face this world of no objective truth by the power of the will. I assert my will to power. He was a critic of the Christian virtues of love, compassion and kindness and so forth, because for him this exhibited a slave mentality. Those who have not asserted themselves are beggars of the powerful. He believed life consisted of a clash of wills. There is no objective standard or measure. This leads him to his idea of the Übermensch, literally the overman or the superman, the hero. And we all know the context where this idea flourished. Nietzsche asserted the primacy of the will over reason, and we are seeing this increasingly today, and not only on our streets. Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre was a Frenchman born in 1905 who died in 1980, one of the most famous thinkers of the 20th century. He studied at the heart of the French intellectual system, and by the 1950s and 60s, he was a very public intellectual indeed. Being and Nothingness was one of his most famous works. In 1946, he wrote his very famous work, Existentialism is Humanism, as an introduction to his philosophy. It is very well written, the central idea being the concept that existence precedes essence. This sounds complex, but actually is an easily grasped concept. By essence, Sartre means the system of ideas and forms as presented over the centuries. So we as human beings have been conditioned to bring our individual existence into conformity with the essence. The classical form is that essence precedes existence. We bring our lives into harmony with the essence. Jean-Paul Sartre reverses this and says the classical form should be reversed, turned upside down. Existence precedes essence. He is, of course, radically atheist. My individuality and my freedom determine who I will be. I will decide, not some handed down essence. In his book, Being and Nothingness, he denies the objectivity of moral essence and truth. I can paint my life on the blank canvas of the nothing. Like Nietzsche, Sartre believes the lack of objective essence opens up the assertiveness of the will. There are many overtones of this current today, especially in the Western media. I decide who I am. I assert my own liberty. If I, born as a man, want to identify as a woman, then I can, because I decide and I assert my will. Sartre says pithily, if God exists, then I cannot be free. But I am free, so God does not exist. For Sartre, his philosophy rests upon the denial of all essence, especially the idea of God, upon whom all other essences in society derive, such as the family and so forth. God for Sartre is the ultimate threat as he proposes essence. Michel Foucault. He is the least known of the four philosophers the bishop is looking at, but perhaps the most directly influential. He, in a way, sums up the other three. Another Frenchman, he was born in 1926 and studied at the same institute as Sartre. He died in 1984. In the 1960s and 70s, he wrote on sexuality, madness, and incarceration. He is complex, but the main lines of his thinking is a kind of archaeology of knowledge, which is quite Darwinian in a way. There is for him what we say, what they said in the past, and what earlier people said about things down to ancient times. And what Foucault finds is variety. For instance, if you study the history of incarceration, imprisonment, and why we imprison people, you see a huge disparity in the reasoning through the centuries. Like Nietzsche, he sees that we thought about things in so many different ways in the past, so how can there be anything objective? Again, we have the Nietzschean perspectivism. How can this be explained? He comes back to language. Those in power organize language in such a way as to keep themselves in power. So there are modes of discourse, a way of talking about things that are simply part of the drive to or the keeping of power. We can therefore see that heterosexual men, whites, whoever are the dominant group, will stigmatize others to maintain power. Well, to be fair to Foucault, most of this he believes is done unconsciously. We inherit the means of discourse. This understanding is partly Nietzsche again, because it is about an expression of will, and language contributes to all these things. So how are those four towering figures influencing us today? Philosophy, irrelevant. Bishop Barron has just shown us why philosophy is anything but irrelevant. No, ideas matter a great deal, and ideas have consequences. The ideas of these four men have deeply influenced our societies today, and ideas incarnate themselves in society, to use a theological word. To summarize, Marx has an antagonistic social theory. He wants to break through the inherited superstructure. Violence is necessary to get to the substructure and change it. Nietzsche, once the superstructure is cleared away, we have the play of powerful wills, i.e. today social media or present-day film, which all seem to be about the individual finding their own way, not the right way, their own way, their own self-fulfillment. The heroic triumph of the will. I've found who I am. Jean-Paul Sartre, the culture of self-invention. If essence has disappeared, then everything is up for grabs by self-assertion, even gender. That recent film sums it all up. The bishop uses this rather amusingly. That film called The Shape of Water. Finding yourself. Water has, of course, no shape. We shape it. We give it shape. I think that is the whole point. It's emblematic of the age. If existence precedes essence, I can be a 6'6" Asian woman, even though I am not Asian nor female and am 5'4" tall. Foucault, the policing of language today. The oppressor uses language to keep us under control. Well, in conclusion, the church stands against all of this, unsurprisingly, because God is the objective standard rejected by these four philosophies. These philosophies are totally antagonistic to the Christian church and her belief. The church is the supreme representative of the essence. Besides, or so importantly, our freedom is not compromised by belief, it is enhanced by coming into harmony with the glory and goodness of the Creator. This is the lie of these philosophies, that human beings lose their freedom when they believe in the divine. That is a lie. The Christian faith teaches that because God is the ultimate good, nothing of our freedom as individual persons is lost by framing our lives in God's terms. It is fulfilled and enhanced, and the baser nature is repressed so that we discover true freedom. The atheistic philosophers of the last 150 years are very popular today, but the consequences of absorbing their thoughts are profoundly misunderstood. I wish you a happy Advent season and a time for reflection and preparation for Christmas. And if all goes to plan, we will be in church together again next week.